Welcome back to the Rabbit Trust YouTube channel. In today's class, I'm going to be sharing with you 15 different formulas that you can use to get your several body measurements. In any case that you don't have them handy or your client sent in a wrong measurement. So once you have the waist, the hip, and the bust measurements, which are the three main measurements, you'll be able to get all other measurements from them. So if you're into ready to wear, this is also going to be useful to you to get measurements, to develop a size chart, and to also get measurements that you can easily use to create your collections. If this is something you would like to learn, kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you. I'm going to be starting with the upper bodice measurements. Okay, so if you want to do your basic bodies or you want to do your bustier, these are the formulas you can use to get your upper bodice measurement. So I will start with the neck width measurement. So if you want to get your neck width measurement, there are two ways to do that. If you have the neck circumference of your client, you can divide that by 5. If you don't have it, you can use your bust circumference measurement divided by 12. Okay, for this tutorial I'm going to be using bust 36. So in this case, if I have 36 inches as my bust circumference and I divide that by 12, it's going to give me 3 inches. Okay, so now the neck width I'm working with is 3 inches. So to do that on your pattern, just take your pattern like this, and then on the center fold area, so this is going to be my center fold, the fold point. So you come to the starting point here, and then you mark your neck width, which in this case is 3 inches. So now, once you have your neck width, the neck depth standard for the back is 1 inch, and then for the front 3 inches. So once you have those two, you take your curved ruler and then you go ahead and connect to create your neckline curve. So this is the neckline for the front, for the back, and then for the front you place your curve again, and then you create your neckline. So that is how you get your neck width measurement. So once you have that, to get your shoulder measurement, which is going to be the second measurement you are working with, all you need to do is to divide your bust circumference. So your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5. Okay, in this case we are working with a bust 36 divided by 6 is going to give us 6 inches. Then we are going to add 1.5 to it, and that is going to give us 7.5 inches. So that is the shoulder we are working with. So again, you're going to come to your pattern. From the fold point here, you go ahead and mark 7.5 inches. So this is your shoulder measurement. So the next measurement we're going to be working on is the armhole measurement. So for your armhole measurement, there are two ways you can get your armhole measurement. You can simply use your shoulder measurement, that's half of your shoulder. You can use half of your shoulder measurement, which we have gotten here. Then you're going to add your shoulder slope to that, whatever shoulder slope you work with. If you work with 1 inch shoulder slope, you add 1 inch to this. If you work with 1.5 inches, you add 1.5 inches to what you have here. But if you don't want to use this measurement, this method, for your armhole, which is the third formula we are getting, you can divide your bust arm divided by 6, your bust circumference divided by 6, just like we did for the shoulder. Then you add 1.5 to that. In this case we are working with 36 divided by 6 plus 1.5, and that gives us 7.5 inches. So whatever measurement you have here, okay, the 7.5 inches, you're going to add your shoulder slope to that. So in this case I work with 1 inch, so what I'm going to do is to add 1 inch shoulder slope to the 7.5 that I have, and that is going to give me 8.5 inches for my armhole. So again, you come to your shoulder, to your bodies like this, and then where your shoulder slopes, where your shoulder measurement stops, which is here, you are going to mark the 8.5 for your armhole. So once you mark your 8.5, you come down here. Remember we added 1 inch shoulder slope, So you come down here and mark your shoulder slope. Then you take that to your neck width measurement, just like this. And then here you are going to have your armhole line, which is also your chest line, and then you can go ahead and create your armhole. So the next measurements you are going to be working on now is how to get your bust point. So to get your bust point, which is the fourth measurement we are working with, our bust point. So to get your bust point measurement, all you need is your bust circumference divided by 4 plus 1. So my bust circumference divided by 4 plus 1 is going to give me my bust point. In this case, we are working with bust 36. Divided by 4 is going to give us 9 inches. And then if you add 1 inch to that, that is going to give us 10 inches. Which means the bust point for this size that I'm working with is 10 inches. So again, you're going to come to your pattern, and then from your starting point here, you are going to mark the bust point measurements that you're working with, which is here. You can go ahead and make that into a straight line. Okay, I'm just going to label this my bust point, and then I'm going to label this my armhole line. So once you have that, the next measurement I'm going to be working on is my bust span measurement, which is going to be the fifth formula that we are working on. So to get your bust span measurement, the bust span is also the space between the nipple, also called the nipple to nipple. So for your bust span, all you need to do is to measure your bust circumference. Okay, your bust circumference divided by 4 minus 2. Okay, so once you have your bust circumference, in this case I'm working with bust 36, divided by 4 is going to give me 9 inches. Then if I subtract 2 inches from that, I'm going to be left with 7 inches. So this 7 inches now is going to be the space from one nipple to the other. But remember, we will normally work on a half scale bodies. So to work on your half scale bodies, all you need to do is to simply divide what you have here by 2, and you're going to have 3.5 inches. So again, you take your half scale like this, and then from the center fold, you mark the 3.5 inches, and this is going to be your bust point. So you can mark this all the way to your waistline. So this line here is my bust span, which is also my nipple to nipple. So once you have that measurement, the next measurement you are going to be working on is how to get your under bust measurement. These measurements are very important if you are working on a busty. So this is going to be the sixth measurement you are working with. So to get your under bust measurement, all you're going to need is your bust point measurement plus the distance between your bust point to your under bust. Okay, so now usually, depending on the size you're working with, you can add between 3 to 4 inches. So you can add 3 inches if you are working with, like, let me just write this down so that you can understand it. So these 3 inches can work for bust 32, 34. If you are working with these sizes, you can just add 3 inches to your bust measurement. If you are working with, you can use 3.5 inches if you are working with bust 36, bust 38. This is what I do. You can try this as well and see if it works for you. So if you're working with this bust measurements, you can easily do this. And then if you're working with bigger bust, you can add 4 inches to your bust point measurement. Let's say you're working with bust 40, 44. So I'm going to be stopping here because there are people that are bigger than this, people that are really busty, that are really on the plus size. Maybe you're working with a bust of 50, 60, which may 50, 52, 55 thereabout. They are really busty, and of course the distance between their bust points and under bust will be more than this. So it's advisable to measure those clients. But if you're working with average size, just like we have here, you can just try to work with this measurement. And even for these sizes as well, if the person is very, very busty, the person is on a big size, someone may be slim and still busty. So if the person is very busty, it's possible that the distance between their bust points and under bust is more than what we have here. So you just have to be careful or you can also experiment with what we have. So this is for your average size, and I already have my bust point to be 10 inches. So what I'm going to do now is to add 3.5 inches to the 10 inches, and then I'm going to come here now and then mark my bust point at 13.5. I hope you get that. So here is going to be my bust point 13.5, my underbust, sorry, 13.5, and then I'm going to label that line my underbust line. So once we have the next measurement I'm going to be marking is my underbust tightening. So the seventh measurement we are going to be working on is our underbust tightening. This measurement is very important, especially if you are working with a bustier. Okay, there are questions around how do I know the measurement to use to tighten my underbust to pad my bustier. So this is going to help you. So for your underbust tightening, the measurement you are going to need is your bust circumference. Okay, that's the round bust, your bust circumference minus underbust circumference. So you take the measurement round your bust and the measurements round your underbust. So once you subtract them, whatever you have, you are going to divide that by 2. So in this case, I'm working with a round bust of 36 inches, and then my round under bust is 30 inches. So if I divide that by 2, I'm going to have 36 minus 30 is going to give me 6. And if I divide 6 by 2, I will have 3 inches as my under bust tightening. So the dart that I'm going to be taking on the under bust is going to be 3 inches. So this 3 inches that you have here, there are several ways you can take this dart. For an average size cup, you can easily divide these 3 inches into 2, and then you take 1.5 on each side. But if you want a deeper cup, okay, if you want a deeper cup, what you need to do is to take from the 3 inches, you can take 1 inch towards your center front, which is here, and then when you get to the side area, the side front, you are going to take the remaining 2 inches to make up your 3 inches. Okay, so you take 1 inch here and then you take 2 inches here. So this way, once you connect it, you will see that you will have a fuller cup. So now you're going to be connecting this to your bust points. To avoid any sharp edge from your bust point, you can come down by half an inch or 0.75 inches, and then what you need to do is to take your curved ruler and then you're going to connect that together. So from here, you are going to connect it, and then you can see that the cup here is not so deep. So when you come to the underbust where you took the most, that you're going to connect from your bust point there to your underbust, and once you do this, now you will see that the cup that you're going to have here is going to be bigger than what you have. So now, depends on what you want, you can do a shoulder dart or an armhole princess dart. Depends on you. I have detailed tutorial on how you can do any of these darts. The main tutorial is just for you to know the measurements that you will need to pad this. So these measurements that you have here, if you want the waist to be really snatched, you can just take the same measurement that you have here on your waistline as well, and then you're just going to simply bring this down. So all of this now becomes your dart, and then you're going to be taking them out. So this will work for the bust 36 that is busty. Okay, this will give you enough room for your cup, and it's going to come out really deep. So once we are done with that, we'll go over to the next measurement, which is our bust radius. Okay, so this bust radius set measurement, that's our measurement 8 for your bust radius. The formula that you need for your bust radius is your, the bust radius can also be called the cup size. Like I said, when you're drafting your corset, it's very important. So the measurement that you will need is just your, the difference between your under bust length minus your bust point. So in this case, the under bust that we are working on, we already gotten our under bust to be 13.5, and then we know our bust point to be 10 inches. So 13.5 minus 10 is going to give you 3.5. So this is your bust radius. So like I said, if you're working with a corset, so let's say I want to work with a shoulder dart here. All I need to do now is to get the distance from my shoulder, and then I'm going to divide that into two. So once I divide it into two, I'm going to connect my bust point to that distance. So once I do this and I want to draft a corset and I need my bust radius, so the 3.5 inches that we got here, you just take it all around, just like this. If you have a compass, you can just set it to 3.5 inches, and then the compass is going to do this for you. But if you don't have a compass, you just, from your bust point, you just take your 3.5 inches all around like this. This is going to assist you in shaping the cup that you're working with, and then you are going to simply connect them and make that into a circle. Again, the tutorial is just on formula. I have a tutorial on how you can do this already as well on the channel. If you need the tutorial, let me know, and then I'm going to link it for you down below. So you are going to get your bust radius just by doing this. So the next measurement we're going to be working on is just a tip on how you can get your dart length. So for your dart length, if you are working with a regular bodice, that you just need to work with a regular waist dart. So your dart length should start 1 inch below your bust point. Okay, so 1 inch from your bust point, and then it should not exceed 2 inches above your hip line. Okay, so if you want to work with a dart, this is a guide. If you're working with a regular straight dart, just make sure that your dart length is 1 inch below your bust point. So you take the dart 1 inch below your bust point, and it should be 2 inches before your hip line measurement. Another tip that I want to do before we move to the sleeve is your waist to hip length measurement. Okay, your waist to hip length measurement as well is you can use this constant measurement. It works for me. You can also practicalize with it. So for me, I use between 7 to 9 inches. So the 7 inches, I use this for people that are not so tall. So if you're working with an average height, you can use 8 inches. And then if you're working with tall people, you can use 9 inches. This measurement works well as well. So now we are done with the basic bodies. Now we're going to move to the measurement. So now the 10th formula that we're going to be getting now is our off shoulder waist measurement. This is important if you are working with an off shoulder. Okay, so if you are working with an off shoulder and you don't want it too off, okay, you don't want it to be too wide. So to get the off shoulder width, all you need to do is your bust span measurement plus 1 inch. In this case, the bust span we are working with is 3.5. I'm going to add 1 inch to that, and that is going to give me 4.5. So if you are working with an off shoulder, let's say you have your pattern folded like this, an off shoulder pattern, you already have your armhole line here, you have your waistline, your whatever you want to work with. So now, and you have already gone off. Remember, off shoulder, you go off by whatever you want to do, 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches, depending on what you want to go off by. So this starting point, you've already gone off. So this here now becomes your starting point, and this is where you are going to be taking your off shoulder width measurement. So now we have 3.5, but this is small. I'm just going to be illustrated. So let's say we are looking at 3.5 inches here. On the chest line here, you're going to take your bust measurement, and then you simply connect like this to have your armhole for your off shoulder. So now you can leave this as it is, and if you want it to have maybe a sweetheart neckline, just like this, or you want it to have like a U neckline, you can do whatever neckline you want with this, and you're good to go. So this measurement works maybe if you're working with a strap and you don't want it too wide, just use your bust span plus 1 inch. You can also use just your bust span measurement if you're on the side. But if you want your off shoulder to be a little bit off, or you want to add leg to it, for me, the measurement that I use is my shoulder divided by 2 minus 2. In this case, the shoulder I'm working with is 15 divided by 2 is going to give me 7.5, and then when I subtract 2 from that, I'm going to have 5.5 inches. So if I want it a little bit off, or I'm adding sleeves to it and I still want it to remain that off, I don't want it to come too off, this is the measurement that I use. So you can try out any of the measurements and then you see what it gives to you. So the next measurement we are going to be working with, which is the 11th measurement, is going to be our cap height measurement. This measurement is important if you want to draft your sleeve. Okay, so for your cap height, the measurement you will need is your bust circumference. You can see how important the bust circumference is. If you have your bust circumference, you can get a lot of measurements just from it. So this circumference, I'm going to divide that by 12, and then I'm going to add 1 or zero point 0.5. If I'm adding a sleeve, and just add 1 or zero point 0.5 inches depending on the measurements you're working with. So now I'm working with a bust of 36 inches divided by 12 plus 1. 36 divided by 12 is going to give me 3 inches, and then if I add 1 inch to that, it's going to give me 4 inches. Okay, so now the caps height I'm going to be using to get my sleeve is 4 inches. So let's say we want to draft a sleeve, and this is the pattern that you are working with. So what you need to do from the head of the sleeve, which is the starting point, you are just going to simply come down by the cap size that you have. So in this case, we have 4 inches, and then you're going to mark the 4 inches. It's going to be your caps height. Okay. So now to know the width that you will use to fold your sleeve, that is going to be the next formula I'm going to be giving us. And that is going to be our formula 12. So to know the sleeve cap width, okay, the sleeve cap width, all you need to do is to take your bust circumference measurement and then you divide that by 6 and then you add 1.5. Okay, this is the measurement you need to fold your sleeve. So this is similar to your armhole if you recall. So remember, we are going to be sewing the sleeve to the armhole, so you need those measurements. So after this, you can add your seam allowance to it. So now bust divided by 6 for me is 6 inches. That's 36 divided by 6 plus 1.5. So if I add all of this together, I'm going to have 7.5 inches. So you can now add whatever allowance that you want to work with. But I'm going to be working with 7.5. So fold your sleeve. All you need to do is to come to the starting point here and then you mark the 7.5. So now this measurement, now you can now go ahead and use it to draft your basic sleeve bodies. Just like we normally do, you connect them like this, you get the midpoints of this, and then you just simply divide it into 4. Once you divide it into 4, you come off here by 0.75, you leave this part and then you come down by half an inch. Then you simply take your curve and then you connect this. This is going to give you your front sleeve. I have a detailed tutorial on this as well. So if you want to. So the 13th measurements we are working on, now we are moving to our trouser. So we are working on formula 13. So the 13th formula we are going to get is how you can calculate your crotch depth. Okay, so to calculate your crotch depth, what you need is just your round hip measurement divided by 4. In this case, the round hip I'm working with is 40. So if I divide that by 4, I'm going to have 10 inch, and this will be fine for your hip for this size. Okay, so now if you are working with a low, maybe a low waist or a low fitting pant, all you need to do is to take this measurement now, the hip divided by 4, and then you subtract 1 inch, then you are going to have 9 inches. This is going to work for your low fitting pant. So now if you are working with a high waist pant, so you are working with a high waist pant, what you need to do, the hip divided by 4, which is 10 inches, what you need to do is to add 2 inches to it, and you're going to have 12 inches. So this 12 inches is going to work perfectly if you are working with high waist pant. So now we're going to go to the next measurement, which is measurement 14. So I'm going to give you the formula to get your crotch extension. Okay, this crotch extension is important for you to be able to draw your crotch curve. So for your crotch extension, the measurement you're going to need is your hip circumference divided by 16. This works well. Okay, so in this case, the hip I'm working with is 40 divided by 16 is going to give me 2.5. So for this measurement, you can use a crotch extension of 2.5 inches. Now there are several ways you can get your crotch extension measurement. You can also use your thigh measurement to get this. So now if you don't know how to get your thigh measurement now, the formula you can use to get your round thigh measurement, which takes us to formula 15, is your hip circumference. Okay, thigh measurement. Let me just label it thigh. So to get your thigh measurement, your round thigh, your hip circumference divided by 4 plus, you can add 1.5 inches, 2.5 inches, or 3 inches. So I'll explain. If you are working with a small size, once you divide your hip circumference divided by 4, you can add 1.5 inches for a small size. If you are working with a medium size, okay, your hip circumference divided by 4, you can add 2.5 inches for that for a medium size. And if you are working with a plus size, okay, for a plus size, you can add your hip circumference divided by 4 plus 3 or even 3.5, depending on how big the person is. So now let me just practicalize what I have done. So if you want to draft your pants, so of course this upper part is going to be your waistline. So you can go ahead now and then mark your hip measurement. And I have told you that to get your hip to waist, you can all use 7 to 9 inches, 7 inches, 8 inches, or 9 inches, depending on the height of the person. Now to get your crotch measurement, we've already marked our crotch depth. To get your crotch depth is hip divided by 4. Okay, this measurement, hip divided by 4, and then we have that as 10 inches. So I'm going to assume this to be my crotch measurement. So all you need to do now to get your, I want to show you another way you can get your crotch extension. So now you have your waist, you have your hip, and then you have your crotch. So here you're going to take your hip divided by 4. In this case, we have 10 inches. So here I'm going to take hip divided by 4, which is 10 inches. I'll take the measurements here, take the measurements here, and then I'm going to make that into a straight line. So the measurement that you have from here to here is your hip divided by 4. So now to know your crotch extension, all you need to do now is to slot in your round thigh measurement on your crotch. Okay, so let's say we're working with a medium size now. We've done our crotch to be, we've done our thigh to be hip divided by 4. So hip divided by 4, in this case 40 divided by 4 is going to give us 10. And I say I'm working with a medium size, so I'm going to add 2.5 to it. Okay, and then my thigh, round thigh, now becomes 12.5. So what you need to do now, remember from here to here we have our hip divided by 4, which is 10. So for your thigh, all you need to do now is to measure your round thigh measurements here. So in this case we are working with 12.5, so I'm just going to assume this to be 12.5 because my ruler, my paper is not that long. So once you have this, so the difference that you have here becomes your crotch extension, and then on this corner just come up by 1 inch, and then you create a really nice crotch curve. Again, I have a tutorial on how you can do this on the channel. You can go ahead and watch that tutorial. So this is all I have for us on. So these are all the measurements that we have talked about. This measurement works fairly, especially if you are into ready to wear, but if it works for me a lot if I don't have access to my client's measurement. But if you are working with extreme body sizes, like people that are really bossy, or people that are a bit on the plus size, maybe size plus 55, 54, thereabouts, it is better to always get their measurements. But in any case you can't get the measurements, you can always try out what we have there. And like I said, this has worked for me a lot, so there's no harm in just trying these measurements out with different sizes, and then you see what you have. I hope you enjoyed making this beautiful tutorial with me. If you enjoyed this, let us know in the comment section. Like, comment and subscribe to our channel, and let me know if you like measurement tutorials like this or any tutorial suggestion. Let me know in the comment section, and I'm going to consider filming a tutorial on it. Bye.